Hello, everyone. Welcome to the MacKids Spring 2024 preview event. My name is Mary Van Aken. I'm the Director of School and Library Marketing at Macmillan Children's Publishing Group.
And hi, everyone. My name is Alexandra Quill, and I'm the Senior Marketing Manager on the School and Library team at Macmillan Children's Publishing Group.
Hello, everyone. My name is Grace Tyler, and I'm the Marketing Assistant of the MCPG School and Library Marketing.
And we are so excited to give you an overview of our spring list of titles, including chapter books, picture books, middle grade, and young adult titles from all of our imprints at Macmillan, including Feiwel and Friends, Farrar, Straus Giroux books for young readers, Henry Holt books for young readers, First Second, Roaring Brick Press, Neon Squid, and Odd Dot. And as you may have heard, we are so excited to have a couple of special guests joining us live. Elvira K. Gonzalez, debut YA memoir author and former collegiate athlete. And then later on in our preview, we will have the New York Times bestselling author and illustrator Loren Long in conversation with his editor, Kate Meltzer, senior editor at Roaring Brick Press, to talk about his inspiring new picture book, The Yellow Bus. A few housekeeping notes before we begin. In the chat, you will see a link for a full list of titles we're discussing today. This link was included in the reminder email you received from Zoom 1 hour ago. To download it, please open that email, scroll to the bottom, and click on the link located there. You can also download the title list by copying the URL on this screen. Next slide, please, into your web browser. If you have any trouble, please contact webinars@booklistonline.com. And next slide. In the digital review copy column for picture books and graphic novels, you can click through to read a digital review copy on issue. Please do not share these links as they are to be used for review purposes only. And in the digital review copy column for middle grade and YA, you'll find a link to request the book on NetGalley where available. Next slide, please. As we only have 60 minutes to present, this is not our full list of titles. Please subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on MacKids SL on Twitter or X to keep up to speed with all of our new and upcoming releases. And finally, if you are live tweeting today, please use hashtag MacKidsPreview. The audience is in listen-only mode, but we welcome questions. You can use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And Booklist does offer captioning on all webinars, so you can enable this by clicking the live transcript option on the toolbar. From there, you can click show or hide subtitles, and you can adjust the size as well. Today's event will be recorded and shared with you after the event. And finally, all participants are expected to maintain an atmosphere of respect and fairness. Anyone who violates the standard of behavior, including engaging in any form of harassment, may, at the discretion of the organizers, be immediately removed. Next slide, please. Now over to you, Alex.
Hi, everyone. To kick things off, please welcome Elvira K. Gonzalez. Elvira is a Tejana author, activist, and entrepreneur from the South Texas borderlands. She's a former collegiate athlete at the University of the Incarnate Word, where she graduated with a degree in business. She coached track and field at the University of Pennsylvania and the Armory in New York City. She is the founder of Writers Incubator and a nonprofit that provides educational resources and scholarships to female student athletes. Hurdles in the Dark is her literary debut, and we're so excited to have her here to talk about her triumphant young adult memoir. Over to you, Elvira.
Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here. I am so excited to talk to you about Hurdles in the Dark. This is my literary debut, so even me just saying that is incredible. It always makes me feel very emotional. The book was written from the perspective of my young teenage self, and the story is inspired by true events. I grew up in a place called Laredo, Texas. It's the least ethnically diverse city in the U.S., inland U.S., and we didn't have a lot of resources growing up there. In fact, also it's like the highest literacy rates in the U.S. So growing up, I didn't have access to books and other things that I felt like could have been very helpful. But what we didn't have, we definitely made it up in other ways, such as culture, food, and a sense of community. So yeah, so the book was inspired by that. And before I dive into the book, I want to say that I'm very honored to be here and also very nervous. This is the first time I talk about the book in this setting. And this book was written in libraries. I used a lot of the resources there because I didn't have access to, again, resources. I didn't have a background in writing or connections with the literary world. So again, I'm really honored and a big advocate of libraries, and I mention it throughout the book as well. So when I was 16 years old, I was sent to juvenile hall, and I never forgot the moment where the doors behind me locked and I entered this small cell. And I remember feeling in that moment like, what did I do to deserve being here? Because in that moment, my world felt like it was turned upside down. There were a lot of things that I couldn't control at the time that led me to feel this way and very hopeless. So that didn't really help my mental health. So the next day when I woke up and I entered this hall, I noticed that there were other girls that looked just like me and they spoke like me, and they were also wearing the same orange jumpsuit. And I remember thinking, wow, we look we look similar. And, over the 2 weeks that I was there, I really built these strong bonds with them. And I realized that we had a lot of things in common as far as our backgrounds, and we grew up in the barrios, and we had been faced with a lot of adversity. We came from broken homes and things like that. So in that moment, I felt a sense of connection for the first time with other people, in the sense that I wasn't alone in my own adversities and circumstances. And just in that moment, I felt there was a glimmer of hope. And I thought, like, what if there are other girls who feel like me as well out there, or young people, and we don't know that they exist? Because in that moment, I didn't know that other people were, dealing with similar things. And that sparked the idea to write this book. So I started writing this book in juvenile 15 years ago. So this book has gone through so much, a long journey, and I'm so happy that soon this book is going to be out, and I hope that it reaches the audience that I envisioned in my mind 15 years ago. And I hope you guys are able to shepherd this story into the hands of young adult readers. And next, I'm going to talk about how I wrote the book, who I hope it reaches, and the message that I hope that young readers get from the book. And I'm going to read a small little piece of my book to you guys. So this book was written, again, from the perspective of my young teenage self. And I used my earlier drafts from when I was young to get into the perspective of young Elvira. And I really wanted to tell the story again from that perspective, because often I feel like we forget as adults that young people face the same emotions as we do, such as grief, love, pain, anger, joy. And I really wanted to talk to that audience because, again, I was once that kid. And I've been journaling since I was really young. So I used some of my journals to recreate some of the scenes. And in fact, some of those journals are going to be published throughout the book. So I'm very excited and nervous to share those journal entries. But I wanted to be really authentic with the story. And I hope that this book reaches young adults, primarily young women and women. But this book has so many different themes and universal themes that I feel like anyone can relate to this book. And the message that I hope that this book, I hope that there's two things that come to mind when I think about why I wrote this book. And one is, the collective experience of dealing with challenges and hurdles. So I hope that young people don't feel alone in their journey, especially, sometimes when you're going through a lot of turmoil, it kind of feels like your world is turned upside down and, no one else understands. So I want young readers to know that they're not alone and there are other people out there that might feel the same way. And then the other message that is really important to me is the courage to face your fears. So for example, hurdles, just thinking about hurdles kind of gives me like a little bit of anxiety, but the hurdles are pretty high, like the hurdles on the track. And often I thought, like, why do I choose to be a hurdler out of all the events? And I'm barely 5 foot tall. So for me, the hurdles are really high. And often I was scared to take that jump. And when you're running track, you got to run full speed to jump over the hurdle. And often, again, I was really afraid. But I thought, like, how do I know what's ahead of that hurdle and what's, what would happen if I just take that leap of faith at full speed? And if I fall, like, that's the worst thing that could happen. I'll get up and finish the race. So if it weren't for me tackling that hurdle full speed when I was really afraid, I wouldn't know what I was capable of. And, a couple of years later, after choosing to run the hurdles, I was top 15 in the US. And I often think that, the medals are amazing and first place is great and all that. But I really think taking that, step forward and taking the leap of faith in anything when you're scared is what truly makes one a champion. So I really want my young adult readers to get to, really grasp that, because I think we glorify the first places and all that. But to me, it's really the willingness to try when you're afraid. And then the other thing that I want to talk about is yeah, I think those are the two things that I would say that I hope my young readers get. And with that said, we don't have a lot of time here. I would like to read a small little piece from my book. And I think we have a little bit of time, right? Yeah. This is towards the end of the book, so I'm going to fill you in here. Okay. An announcer with a deep Texas twang blares to the speakers. Up next, we got the girls' 300-meter hurdles on the track. I peel my eyes away and glance up at the Jumbotron. Smack dab in the center of the first backstretch of the track, the clock reads 7:05 p.m. Just below the time, over 10 camera people position themselves for our race. I even noticed an ESPN camera. Everyone is talking about how this event could be one of the fastest girls' 300-meter hurdle races in Texas high school history. Walking with my head held high, I lead the hurdle group onto the track. As the parched summer breeze sets in and the shadows of the crowded stands shade half of the 400-meter track, the bleachers begin to rattle and the fans erupt into chants and cheers. There's an electrifying energy in the air, and with a backdrop of the Texas Capitol under clear blue skies, it feels like a dream. In this exact moment, I imagine the ground rumbling, tilting the tectonic plates with all the different sounds vibrating around me. Super track fans in Texas are the loudest. They're like a modern version of spectators during a gladiator fight. And it sort of makes me feel like I'm a young gladiator at the Coliseum. But of course, I'm not a gladiator. I'm a young Tejana from a border town who had to battle real-life hurdles. Now I'm at the top of the world, in my world. Running became a safe place for me, a place to retreat from everything and everyone. It's where I've taken all my feelings and experiences and transformed them into something positive. While there has been so much I couldn't control, running is one thing I could. I don't worry about anybody trying to come in between me and my dreams anymore. I determine how I perform and what will become my destiny. I can do this. I'm mentally prepared to face my final hurdle. All my hard work has paid off. And today, I'm representing myself, which means I'm also representing Ghost Town, South Middle, the Rucas, Anderson, my community, and all the kids who dream big. Soon, I'll be carrying their voices and stories on the soles of my spikes as I cross the finish line and beyond, because if I can do it, anyone can too. The end. Thank you again, everyone. And I'm so excited for this book to be out in a couple months. And I hope that you guys are able to shepherd the story and get it into the hands of young readers around the country and around the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us, Elvira, and for sharing your story.
Thank you.
So first off, we have a few adult titles coming soon, including some fun sticker jigsaws. Next slide, please. And on to YA, next slide, please, where we're kicking it off with A Crane Among Wolves by June Her, the best-selling author of The Red Palace. Based on the true story of the cruelest tyrant king in Korean history, this book follows a teen girl who risks everything to save her sister from the king's clutches, and in doing so, reluctantly joins forces with an enigmatic prince to stage a coup. June's editor asked her to make this her angry book, and she delivered. 17-year-old Isol has lived a sheltered, privileged life despite the kingdom's turmoil. When her older sister Soo-yeon becomes the king's latest prey, Isol leaves the relative safety of her village, traveling through forbidden territory to reach the capital in the hopes of stealing her sister back. But she soon discovers the king's power is absolute, and to challenge his rule is to face certain death. This book has a flawed and fiercely relatable heroine, a heart-wrenching sister dynamic, and a slow burn enemies to lovers romance we know readers will clamor for. Next slide, please. We're still celebrating AL's debut icebreaker, receiving a Prince honor, and are doubly excited to bring readers back to Heartland's campus in this standalone novel that takes place in the icebreaker universe with some cameos from fan favorite characters. While In Repair is a departure from the classic romance of AL's first book, it retains the focus on friendship, self-discovery, and most importantly, hope. Next slide, please. And now we'll hear from award-winning author Jas Hammonds about their new novel, Thirsty. Next slide, please.
Hello, librarians and friends. My name is Jas Hammonds, and I'm the author of We Deserve Monuments and the forthcoming novel, Thirsty. Thirsty is about an 18-year-old named Blake who is trying to gain admittance into an elite sorority called the Serena Society. The pledge process involves a lot of partying and drinking, and in order to impress the society, Blake turns to alcohol in order to transform herself into this funny, life of the party type of girl because she thinks that's the key to getting accepted. But as the pledge process intensifies, so does Blake's drinking until it's seeping into every corner in her life. Told primarily over the course of the summer before college, Thirsty also implements flashbacks that give context to how Blake was introduced to drinking culture and how it shaped her worldview. I wrote this book at the beginning of my own sobriety journey, so it's incredibly personal to me. I've been sober for over 4 years now, and I think it's important to showcase stories about addiction that feature queer girls of color. Thirsty is perfect for the Euphoria fans in your life, as well as teen readers who love Kathleen Glasgow and Ashley Woodfolk and other hard-hitting contemporary authors. It's out May 14th, so just in time for Pride Month and Summer Reading List. Thank you so much for your time and for all of the work you do for young readers everywhere.
Next slide, please. Next up is I Wish You Would by Eva DesLauriers. This friends to enemies to lovers YA contemporary romance is told over 24 hours through dual points of view. The voice is authentically teen, and the secrets threatening to unravel are as messy and world-turning as those in To All the Boys I've Loved Before. The senior class overnight at the beach is the perfect opportunity for a fresh start before school begins. It's also when each student writes a very personal letter to themselves, what they would do this year if they were braver to burn in a bonfire. But when Natalia worries her profession of love for Ethan, her best friend since middle school, might be fished out by a classmate, she frantically pulls it out of the jar and accidentally loses a few others into the wind. 7 time bombs on the beach for anyone to find. What could possibly go wrong? While I Wish You Would is a contemporary romance with edge-of-your-seat stakes, it also tackles heavier conversations about multiracial identity, wealth, privilege, and divorce, making it perfect for fans of other books that strike a similar balance, like You've Reached Sam and Tweet Cute. Next slide, please. National Book Award finalist Anna Marie McLemore's newest book takes a turn down a road we haven't seen from them yet. This is Anna Marie's 9th book with us, and they are starred review royalty on our list because of their compelling stories. This is a standalone YA novel in a genre they've affectionately nicknamed sparkly horror. Think of this as akin to a YA queerer Mexican Gothic. This book stars 2 Latina sisters, Isla and Renata. When the sisters leave home to attend a prominent finishing school, Alari House, Isla only lasts a day before she's running back home. But Renata stays, and the sister who Isla once knew, there's no trace of her once Renata returns home. Determined to find out what happened, Isla returns to the school, but when she gets involved with a mysterious, conniving girl who's either controlling the house or carrying out its deadly orders, she discovers secrets within the school's walls beyond her wildest nightmares. If the gorgeous cover doesn't draw you in, we know Anna Marie's characters and their countless secrets will. Next slide, please.
Get excited for this new book from Farida Abike-Yamide, author of the New York Times best-selling thriller Ace of Spades, and Adiba Jagathar, author of award-winning romances. The pair of best friends blend their writing styles to make for a seamless dual point-of-view story, and if the title sounds familiar, it's because the story is loosely inspired by that favorite 1994 film, 4 Weddings and a Funeral. Let's get this one thing straight. This is a love story. I know both the funeral and the arson might be alarming, but I can assure you that this is simply a tale of 2 doofuses who fell in love over the course of several years. And thus begins this YA contemporary romance about a Bengali Muslim boy named Saeed and a Nigerian Muslim girl named Tiwa. Saeed and Tiwa were both childhood best friends, but once Saeed began attending boarding school, they stopped speaking. Now, as teens, their favorite librarian has died, and Saeed is brought home early for the summer to attend the funeral. The 2 ex-best friends are determined to avoid each other, but when the local Islamic center accidentally catches fire and the mayor lets Tiwa know that they don't plan on repairing it, Tiwa will need Saeed's help to change the mayor's mind. You will fall in love with this book's swoony childhood best friends to lovers romance, a timeline that jumps between past and present, Muslim representation, and great banter. Next slide, please. For all of the Tomi Adeyemi fans in the audience, the wait is finally over. Get ready for the mind-blowingly epic battles, immersive world building, intense magic, a touch of romance, and all the familiar characters we love or that we love to hate. When Zélie sees the royal palace in Tomi's first book, she thought her battles had come to an end. Zélie never expected to find herself locked in a cage and trapped on a foreign ship. Now warriors with iron skulls traffic her and her people across the seas, far from their homeland. Then everything changes when Zélie meets King Balder, her true captor, the ruler of the skulls, and the man who has ravaged entire civilizations to find her. Balder's quest to harness Zélie's strength sends Zélie, Amari, and Zane searching for allies in unknown lands. It will take everything Zélie has to face her final enemy and save her people before the skulls annihilate them for good. Tomi Adeyemi helped change the landscape of YA fantasy with her debut, Children of Blood and Bone. And as the series comes to an epic conclusion, it's the perfect time for readers to discover or revisit this epic series. I cannot wait for you to read how this turned out. Next slide, please. The Great Cool Ranch, Dorito in the Sky. This is author Josh Galarza's semi-autobiographical debut, and it is magnificent, emotional, and honest. Latine boy Brett Harrison is just shy of 16 and cannot talk about his adopted mom's terminal cancer, even with his best friend, because he knows it could mean he's an orphan twice over. He channels all of his anxieties and fear and depending in his own intergalactic comic book series, but he is slowly and then quickly unraveling, and food becomes what he relies on to cope. As eating becomes easier, talking gets harder, and before long, he's losing ground to a fear that he is just truly unlovable. I need to share that there are graphic depictions of eating disorders in this book, but Josh Galarza brings such teen boy levity and sweetness to what otherwise is a very difficult time in a young man's life. In spite of everything, Brett's story ends happily. He finds support in his community and in himself, but it is still clear to the reader that healing is not linear. This is for readers who love Marco Shiro and John Green. Josh, a printmaker and MFA student in Richmond, is an advocate for health at every size and is a passionate advocate for showing teen boys, especially, that there is no one right way to be a man. Next slide. 18 Roses is Shannon C.F. Rogers' next standalone YA novel. Her first novel, her debut, I'd Rather Burn Than Bloom, was just named the Young Adult winner for the Asian Pacific American Literature Award, and she received a very well-deserved medal. Now she is bringing that same standout voice and complex, relatable characters to 18 Roses. Lucia Cruz is turning 18 and she's expected to have a traditional Filipino debut with 18 friends standing beside her. But there's a problem. She just has the one friend, Esme, who has decided to expand her own social horizons, leaving Lucia in the dust. Now, truly friendless, she has to decide how far she will go out of her comfort zone to please her mother and have the debut of everyone else's dreams. Written based on an own personal experience and with both humor and heart on every single page, 18 Roses is a powerful YA novel about family, community, and expectations. Next slide, please. Oh my goodness, Jen Wang. I hope we have some Jen Wang fans in the house. Jen is the author of Stargazing and The Prince and the Dressmaker, and I'm so excited to introduce you to Ash's Cabin. Some people have asked me whether this book is in a similar vein to Prince and the Dressmaker, and while it could not be more different, I think it is every bit as groundbreaking. This is a book about climate panic, about teen alienation, about the bond between a grandparent and a grandchild, about gender identity, and about the generational divides between Gen X and Gen Z. This is a book about Ash, a young person who is both desperately unhappy and exceptionally capable. A teen whose alienation from her family and peers is so extreme that they would rather disappear into the wilderness and take their chances with disease, injury, starvation, and bears. And so they do. Um, I always think of this as sort of Hatchet meets Flamer by Mike Corrado. It is like Hatchet, a survival story, and that while Jen is never once romanticizing Ash or their choices or the near suicidality of their decision to rough it in the wilderness, rather than to find their place in the human race. And this is what makes it so moving when Ash is finally forced to make an explicit choice, and they choose life over death. They choose a lifetime of the frustration and the work, but also the connection and the joy in the business of being human that makes this book. I just get chills just thinking about it. I can't wait for you to read it. Next slide, please. Something Like Right by H.D. Hunter. In this YA contemporary novel, a biracial black and white teen boy named Zay contends with a life-altering year in an alternative school. Right on the eve of his incarcerated father's release, Zay injures another student in self-defense and is sent to Broadlawn Academy as punishment. It's a place of last chances of students with nowhere else to go. There he meets Bevan, a beautiful Eritrean immigrant girl who's determined to transcend their circumstances, who becomes Zay's first love, and Kenny, an easygoing guide to Zay's new world, who unfortunately becomes trapped there by circumstance and is not able to move forward the way Zay eventually can. It's an honest, raw glimpse into the systemic inequality experienced by young people in racialized communities and a tender contemplation of first love, broken families, and healing generational trauma. Next slide, please. And now we will move on to middle grade, but first a preview of a continuing series, Icon and Inferno by Marie Lu, Masquerade of the Heart by Katie Rose Poole. Next slide, please. We have even more books available on NetGalley, so please peruse our title list for this event today. Next slide, please. And next slide, and next slide. And here we are at middle grade. Next slide, please. Linus and Etta Could Use a Win by Caroline Huntoon. The first thing that will pull you into Caroline's sophomore title, Linus and Etta Could Use a Win, are the chapter titles. It would be really great if I could pull off a successful interaction with a peer this morning. Will be so relatable to middle schoolers navigating the socially awkward phase of life, not to mention many adults. Caroline introduces us to two memorable characters. Linus, the new boy at school who came out as trans last year and is trying to keep it quiet in his new school, and Etta, the class misanthrope. A cruel bet is the origin of their friendship between them, and the only question is whether their friendship can survive once that bet is revealed. As a non-binary person, parent, and middle school teacher, Caroline knows a thing or two about what it's like to be a queer preteen, and they bring that authenticity to the page with tenderness and care. They artfully demonstrate how many barriers there are to trans kids living their full, authentic lives without ever making Linus feel one-dimensional. So many trans kids will feel seen reading this book, and I can't wait for them to be introduced this May. Next slide, please. And now I will turn it over to Vera Brosgol to introduce her next middle grade graphic novel, following Be Prepared, Plain Jane and the Mermaid. Next slide, please.
Hi, My name is Vera Brosgol, and I'm the author and illustrator of Plain Jane and the Mermaid, coming May 7th from First Second Books. Plain Jane is a middle grade graphic novel adventure story about a plain-looking girl named Jane. Jane's wealthy parents have died, and because women can't inherit, Jane is about to lose her home. To solve her problems, she proposes marriage to Peter, a gorgeous boy she's been in love with since childhood. Peter accepts, and it looks like all of her problems are solved until Peter is kidnapped by a mermaid. Jane has to journey across the bottom of the ocean on foot, encountering every other underwater fairy tale I love and several that I made up. Along the way, she grapples with her lifelong struggle with appearance and learns that beauty is extremely skin deep, especially when skins are removable. It's funny, heartfelt, a little creepy, maybe tiny bit romantic. It's perfect for people who love fairy tales and want a heroine with a waistline bigger than her wrists. It's the book I would have loved to have as a little girl, and I really hope you like it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Mountain of Fire. If you are a fan of authors like Steve Shankin and Deb Heiligman, who write immersive, edge of your seat nonfiction, and you have not discovered Rebecca Barone, please do not wait a second longer. In her latest book, Mountain of Fire, Rebecca recounts the violent volcanic eruption of Mount St. Helens on May 18, 1980, the story of the people who perished, those who survived, and the heroes who fought to raise an alarm. This book is about how tenacity and determination saved tens of thousands of lives. Rebecca has engineering degrees and uses her expertise to offer fascinating facts about volcanoes and earthquakes with strong earth science curriculum tie-ins. And the level of research she did here is mind-boggling. It includes tons and tons of interviews with scientists and survivors. She goes above and beyond to get the atmosphere just right. But most of all, this is a book your readers will not be able to put down. To bring the story to life, we've also included a QR code at the back of the book with photos from this terrifying event. Next slide, please. I have a feeling that everyone in this room will know the exact kids who are going to love the big book of useless knowledge. Our incredibly inventive imprint, Neon Squid, is flipping the script on the encyclopedia and have put together a 208-page book for 8 to 10-year-olds filled with useless knowledge, or maybe just useless to some. Despite being on the face of it a very silly book, we've got very serious people to write it. The sections are broken down by subject area, and the book is written by experts with a crack team of illustrators amping up the humor. Next slide, please. I think the best way to get across what this book is share my favorite fact from the book. Did you know that the US government, yes, our government, operates a spy program that trains dolphins and sea lions to conduct clandestine underwater missions? Shocking. What we love about this book is that while it is not curriculum based, it has so much potential to inspire a love of art, history, and geography. Next slide, please. This book, Puzzle Heart, speaks to my Mr. Lemoncello's library loving heart. Puzzle Heart is for those kids in your school or library who can't get enough of mysteries or logic puzzles. In the book, we follow 12-year-old non-binary tween Perigee Clark, who is on a mission to solve why their father has been so down lately, and ultimately to free themselves from the long shadow their father's mental health casts over their life. They come up with a plan to reunite their father with his estranged mother, who also happens to live in a puzzle house. And let me tell you about this puzzle house. Built by Peregrine's grandmother years ago, this house has moving walls, secret corridors, tons of codes to break, and ultimately becomes an escape room as Peregrine's grandmother tries to sell the house. And even better yet, it is a narrator of the book. That's right, the book switches points of view between Perigee and the house, making this an extra twisty book. It features logic puzzles throughout, as well as illustrations to help guide readers so they can solve the mystery inside the puzzle house alongside Perigee. But ultimately, to save everyone in the puzzle house, Perigee will have to solve the most baffling puzzle of all, human emotions. Next slide, please. The Spindle of Fate is a sparkling debut and the first in a duology about 12-year-old Evie May. When Evie May discovers that her recently deceased mother was the head of a guild of magical weavers, she enters the Chinese netherworld to try and bring her back with the help of a magical spool of thread and a powerful but destructive staff. Amy Lee researched Chinese mythology extensively when writing this book and took great care to make sure that the underworld is accessible for middle grade readers. Icky, but never PG-13. This novel is everything middle grade readers love, a wicked adventure full of peril with a layered and strong female protagonist who is also just hilarious. But I also want to mention what I found so special about Evie May as a protagonist. She's always hearing how weird it is that she's never cried over the death of her mom. And she's really someone who struggles to emote outwardly, and everything's just very internal for her. And so as the book goes on, she also realizes that it's okay to show emotion or not, however is most natural to you. And I think there are probably a lot of kids who might see themselves in this. It's a really fresh point of view, and I'm so excited for readers to join in on Evie May's adventure. Next slide, please. As with the big book of useless knowledge, again, I think you're going to know exactly what kids are going to eat up the haunted states of America. This is a middle grade anthology featuring 52 different stories from 52 authors. Really, I won't get too in depth here because we're running short on time, but this is to hand to anyone who can really take the spooky stories from all across the country. Next slide. Following on the heels of her first masterful foray into spooky territory, Ghost Book, which earned 5-star reviews, Remy Lai is dialing up the fright factor with Read at Your Own Risk. This is the illustrated sketch diary of a young girl who's being haunted by a Ouija-style board game that goes terribly wrong. Next slide, please. What begins as a game quickly turns into a potentially deadly curse when an evil spirit starts conversing with her directly on the page. Next slide, please. There's also just an amazing twist, and I can't wait for you to see what Remy has pulled off in just 160 pages. Hand this to any kids who have an insatiable appetite for diary-style stories and a need for nightmares. Next slide. We have so many more middle grade books for you to read and enjoy. Next slide, please. And so many are available on NetGalley. Next slide. And chapter books.
Hello. Our next title, Rachel Friedman Breaks the Rules by Sarah Caput, illustrated by Genevieve Coate, is the first book in a new chapter book series. I love a great chapter book heroine, and we've got one here in this new series featuring Rachel Friedman, a kid who knows exactly who she is, an excellent gymnast, a good sister, and an even better cat mom. She loves her Jewish community, making peanut butter halal with her best friend, and she absolutely does not like following the rules. Rachel and her dad make a deal that if she follows all the rules for 1 week, she will receive an award. However, when her cat escapes, she has to break some rules, getting into a little more chaos than she bargained for. This is author Sarah Caput's first chapter book. She is also the author of Second Chance Summer. Sarah is heavily involved in disability advocacy around autism and neurodiversity, and she loves writing about neurodiverse characters. She is continuing that here as Rachel Friedman has ADHD. We're publishing these simultaneously in paperback and hardcover with black and white illustrations throughout, with a second book following in September. These books are the perfect combo of classic chapter book slice of life humor and hijinks with great Jewish representation. Next slide, please. Bodega Cats Picture Perfect, written by Elda Enis Brogos and illustrated by Sierra Faison, is the first in another standout chapter book series. In the Heights meets Front Desk in this heartwarming and funny illustrated story about the friendship between a Bodega's Cat's owner and his newly adopted furry friend, with the focus on family and community. Next slide, please. Miguel Rosado wants nothing more than to see and draw the world, or at least anywhere beyond the four walls of his family's bodega in Washington Heights for street savvy and newly adopted cat Lolo. That sounds just perfect if it means he's far, far away from the hungry, lonely nights he once spent in the freezing cold outdoors. When Miguel ditches his responsibility and lies to his parents about joining art club, his dream of juggling it all comes crashing down. Lolo will have to decide if he's willing to be there for his new friend Miguel through anything, even venturing back into the frightful outdoors and busy New York City sidewalks. Can they trust each other enough to take on this adventure together? Told in dual point of view of Miguel and Lolo, Bodega Cat's Picture Perfect is perfect for fans of Me Ever After and Ways to Make Sunshine. Each book will be under 200 pages, stand alone, follow a different protagonist, and publish every 6 months. The perfect recipe to get young readers excited and hooked on a new series. Next slide, please. Be sure to check out these must-read chapter books in our preview title list that are a great selection for the kids in the 6 to 10 age ranges. Next slide, please.
And on to picture books. Next slide, please. So let's kick it off with It's Pride Baby, a joyful debut that encourages kids to take pride in themselves and know that they are always loved. Focusing on Black Gay Pride Day in Washington, D.C., readers will enjoy watching two queer parents get their child ready for a day at the National Mall. Next slide, please. From cheerful neighbors to colorful outfits to fireworks, the vast LGBTQIA community is represented here in body, spirit, and pride flags galore. Next slide, please. Alan R. Wells's poetic text perfectly captures the expansiveness of a parent's love, while Diavale's art bursts off the page. Back matter includes an author's note and a brief history of the Black Gay Pride movement. It's Pride Baby brims with joy and features an uplifting message that children in every family need to hear. Next slide, please. Next up, we have author Hanh Bui to tell you more about her heartwarming new picture book.
Hi, my name is Hanh Bui, and I'm the author of ÁNH'S New Word, illustrated by Bao Liu. This is a story about a child named Anh who lives at a refugee camp with their family in Pennsylvania. Anh struggles to learn English and find just the right words. Their teacher, Miss Mary Ellen, is kind and patient with Anh. When they discover a sweater with an adorable animal on it, Anh finds the courage to speak their first English word and embrace their voice in a new country. This story is based on my own experiences at a refugee camp learning English from my first teacher. I wanted to write this story to help children feel empowered, to know that they too can be brave and do hard things. Thank you for listening to me share, and I hope that this story will help you be reminded of the impact of kindness.
Next slide, please. When a grandchild visits her abuelo, he always meets her at the door. Without words, he takes her hand and they walk the long sidewalk to the ocean, big and blue. Next slide, please. No matter the season, hot or cold, their favorite place to spend time together is the beach. At the beach, the usually reserved abuelo is able to open up about his youth in Havana. In recalling the tastes, sounds, and smells of his childhood, he brings Cuba alive for his grandchild. Next slide, please. This beautifully written picture book is told through changing seasons from summer to fall, winter to spring. Tatiana Gardel's magical illustrations capture the colors of each season, like the lush pinks and purples that fill the sky during fall, or the cozy blues accentuated with warm cookies that depict winter. Abuelo, the Sea, and Me is a heartwarming picture book that explores intergenerational connections, family history, and the immigrant experience. This story draws inspiration from the author's experience as a grandchild of a Cuban immigrant and the illustrator's experience as a Brazilian immigrant. They've each written moving authors and illustrators' notes, which are included in the back matter. Next slide, please. In A Terrible Place for a Nest, Juno and his mom have just moved into a new home, and he hates everything about it. The new school, his new classmates, his new room. Next slide, please. Outside his bedroom window, Juno notices a family of mourning doves have started a nest atop the fence, and they seem to be struggling to make it work too. Perched precariously on the edge of the gate, the birds seem sad and lonely and maybe even a little scared. Juno concludes this new place is a terrible place to build a nest. Next slide, please. But as winter turns to spring and the doves grow, so does Juno. And while this new place may be scary and sometimes lonely, they will all make it work together. With the help of a new friend, Juno discovers that even if things don't turn out exactly as you'd expect, there's still plenty to discover and enjoy. Perfect for fans of memory jars, A Terrible Place for a Nest is a tender lyrical tale about facing new experiences with empathy and courage. Next slide, please. Next, we have two very special guests, Scott Hoying and Mark Hoying, authors of How Lucky Am I? Here they are to tell you about their debut picture book. Next slide, please.
Hello, everybody! What's up, you guys? I'm Scott Hoying.
My name's Mark Hoying.
We are so excited to present to you our very first children's book. It's called How Lucky Am I?
This story is all about the journey of a mayfly and his adventures throughout his entire life.
Yes, and we got this idea when we were cooking one day. I accidentally trapped a fly in the freezer, and Mark, being the angel he is, he was like, we must set it free. Flies don't live that long. And so we were curious, how long do flies live? And we Googled it, and we discovered that a mayfly is the shortest living creature on Earth. It only lives 24 hours, exactly 24 hours. We thought that was so fascinating. And so we wrote a little story about this mayfly's entire life.
This story is all about making life an adventure and exploring the highest heights.
And about the amazing relationships you could discover and cultivate along the way. Children's books and children's stories, children's movies, these are some of the most beautiful memories that we have as kids, and they were so impactful. And so we wanted to create a story for others.
As we start this new chapter of our lives, we actually recently got married back in July. We really hope this story inspires families and children and generations to come. There's a song that goes along with the book, and Scott is going to sing a 30-second excerpt of it.
But before we do that, we just want to say thank you from the bottom of our hearts to all the educators and teachers who inspire kids and change kids' lives every single day. You have more impact than you know, and we are so grateful for you. And we hope you enjoy this little preview of How Lucky Am I? Well, good morning, Mayfly. It's your time to meet the sky. Spread your wings, 'cause life is not to be wasted. There are worlds to explore at every turn, an open door. But how can I? Well, you can fly, I can fly. How lucky am I? Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Mwah.
Next slide, please. This is the remarkable story of Robert Smalls, a little-known hero of the Civil War, whose story is written for us by his great-great-grandson, Michael Bouwer Moore, and illustrated by Caldecott Honor and Coretta Scott King Award recipient Brian Collier. Next slide, please. Robert grew up enslaved and was made to load freight on a steamship. Over the years, Robert gained the trust of the crew and officers, learning to sail the ship and advancing to the role of wheelman. During the Civil War, the ship was engaged by the Confederate Army, and from his vantage point on the ship, Robert came up with a daring, dangerous plan to win his and his family's freedom. Next slide, please. On the night of May 13th, 1862, Robert commandeered the ship, disguised himself as the captain, and bravely drove past numerous Confederate security posts to deliver the ship into the hands of the Union Army. 16 enslaved passengers, including Robert and his family, were now free. Brian Collier's rich collage illustrations capture the scenes of this extraordinary moment in history. With 2-starred reviews already in, most recently from Kirkus calling it a moving tale of triumph that brings the past to life, Freedom on the Sea is a powerful story of resilience that will inspire young readers to lead with courage, compassion, and conviction. Next slide, please. When Cesaria arrives at the Seaside Carnival, she quickly puts on her costume, fluffs up her glorious feathers, prepares her performance, but refuses to put on her shoes, even when her dance director tells her to. Cesaria is deaf, and she knows that if she puts on her shoes, she won't be able to feel the music through the soles of her feet. But she also knows her teammates need her. Next slide, please. After she gains her confidence, she marches back to the stage, determined to stand up for herself and perform with her teammates. In a triumphant moment, Cesaria teaches the others what it means to hear the music through the soles of their feet. Next slide, please. Denise Rosario Educe, a picture book author hailing from Rio de Janeiro, and illustrator Priscilla Soares, a deaf artist also from Brazil, have created such a powerful book as their debut. Cesaria Feels the Beat is a lyrical and heartfelt story about deafness, community, and carnival. Next slide, please. Once Upon a Friend marks #1 New York Times bestselling author Dan Gemeinhart's first foray into writing picture books. Paired with Shin Yon Moon's soft, stunning illustration style, Once Upon a Friend offers a hefty dose of warmth, humor, and most of all, imagination. Next slide, please. As soon as a young reader opens the cover of Migo's book, the pair are the best of friends. Side by side, they leap from the adventures in Migo's stories to the adventures in the child's real life. Next slide, please. From courageously creeping into shadowy caves to weathering very big days like the first day of school, the friends journey and grow together through thick and thin. A friend you make in a book is a friend you never have to leave behind. Perfect for fans of Toy Story and Inside Out, Once Upon a Friend is an imaginative ode to the beloved fictional characters we meet in stories, the comfort and joy we find in them, and the delight of passing them down through generations. Next slide, please. Think a Thought serves as a guide to practicing mindfulness for young readers and is filled with words of affirmation to encourage readers to find calm from within. Next slide, please. With a soothing watercolor palette, this engaging read aloud, next slide please, is a great tool for librarians and educators to talk to students not only about mindfulness, but also what thoughts are and about how we can control or embrace them. Next slide please. Be sure to check out these popular series and continuing series. Next slide please. And even more must-read picture books in our preview title list, including new books from Tyler Gordon. Next slide please. Cleo Wade and Nancy Tillman. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. What Can a Mess Make by B. Johnson and many more. Next slide, please. And as you'll see, we also have a wonderful new selection of Neon Squid titles. Next slide, please. And Odd Dot titles coming soon. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And now for our live Q&A with beloved author and illustrator Loren Long and his wonderful editor, Kate Meltzer. Kate Meltzer grew up in Great Neck, New York, the very town that inspired Fitzgerald's West Egg in The Great Gatsby. She left her literary birthplace to study French at NYU, spending a year abroad in Paris in search of lost time and the perfect croissant. Since then, she's found a new home in children's books as a senior editor at Roaring Brook Press, where she edits books for all ages by New York Times bestselling and award-winning creators. Now I'll send it over to Kate to introduce Loren Long.
Thank you, Alexandra. I am delighted to be here introducing a man who truly needs no introduction, especially in such a warm virtual room full of teachers and librarians, but I will do my best. Loren Long is the author and illustrator of the New York Times bestselling Otis picture book series, now an animated television series on Apple Plus. He is also the illustrator of the #1 New York Times bestsellers of The I Sing by Barack Obama, Love by Matt de la Pena, and Change Sings by presidential inaugural poet Amanda Gorman, among many other beloved picture books, like his re-illustrated edition of the classic The Little Engine That Could by Waddy Piper. He lives near Cincinnati, Ohio, with his wife and adorable rescue dog, Charlie. Hi, Loren. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Kate. Hello, everyone. It's an honor to be here. I'm so excited. This is really fun for me, Kate, because I make my books right here by myself, right in this studio. But it's not very often I get to talk about my books with the other part of the collaborative team, and that is you, an editor. And I always like to say that. So my book's on this, my name's on the book, but there's a whole team. We had 2 amazing editors. This is my first book, by the way, with Macmillan and Roaring Brook Press. I'm so excited about it. It's the first book I've both written and illustrated in about 6 or 7 books in my career. So I'm very excited about it. But it's a big collaboration, isn't it, Kate? So it's fun to be in conversation with you.
It is, and you are as generous as you are brilliant, Loren. We've got a lot to cover, so I'm going to dive right in. We're here to talk about the Yellow Bus, which is right behind me here. As you kind of hinted at, Loren, an author and an editor get to work in a little creative bubble for so long. It is such a thrill to finally be talking about the book with the world. So to kick things off, can you tell us where the Yellow Bus began her journey, which is to say, where did the story come from?
Absolutely. As some people may know, that I illustrate other authors' stories as well as some of my own. I'm not a prolific writer. I still am much more comfortable illustrating books, but I'm always looking for ideas. And this one came along from me running along daily for the last few years with my crazy hound dog, Charlie, a wooded trail not far from our house here in Southwest Ohio. And I noticed, Kate, through the trees, this old, rusted out, abandoned school bus sitting in a paddock surrounded by goats. Now, it's a curious sight. So after a couple of years, as I'm running by, I started asking myself questions. What about that bus? How did it end up there? Down and out in a field, all broken down with glass shattered and flat tires, rust accumulating, and goats climbing in and out. But the interesting thing happened to me as I'm running along. It put a smile on my face. The bus seemed happy. So as a kind of a storyteller, I suppose, I started asking myself, Loren, why do you think the bus is happy? And that's what we do when we're writing a story. So my answer to that sort of unlocked a story. So I did start thinking, okay, I've got a little story about the life of this particular bus. Maybe it's a simple little picture book, but then it became something kind of important about purpose in life and the feeling we get when we do the simple thing of doing something for others. So my answer to my question, why does that bus seem happy, gave me the story of the yellow bus. And that's when, you know, when you're writing something and all of a sudden you start getting excited about it, that's when I really wanted to go back to my studio and put that down.
I love hearing you talk about the idea, Loren, and I feel like I learn something new every single time. From Otis the Tractor to Love and now the Yellow Bus, your work has such artistic range, and I really admired how you push yourself and you try new things with your artwork. Can you give us a peek into your process on this book and how it might have differed from your past books?
Absolutely. So I had this manuscript that I wrote, it was the passage of time was very important to the life of this bus. I sort of figured that it's about a 60-year span. So passage of time and all of the different places that the bus goes. So it starts out, right, like every yellow school bus. It's bright and shiny, carrying the most important cargo from one important place to another. So I've got these words, I've got this story. I'm kind of proud of it, I think. But how do I get now to the visual part? It's like hard enough to write a story, right? For me. Now I've got to illustrate it. I've got to make this become this. It's not easy, you know.
You make it look easy, Loren.
So the first thing I did, Kate, is I made this one sketch. It's a drawing of the little town to give me an idea of what this little village might look like where the yellow bus lives and works. And there's the yellow bus, and it's getting ready to go across a bridge along mountains and down into a valley where there's a farm along a river in a gorge. Okay, so I did this drawing, Kate. I'm pretty proud of it. I think it's a decent drawing. I say so to myself. But now I want my little readers to open this book and see the entire span of the story at one glance. I want to be able to go in a bird's eye view and over top. So it's like, okay, I just made this drawing up out of my head. That's not a bad little house there, Loren. Okay, well, what does that house look like from a bird's eye view? Okay, this was sort of easy. Making up shadows, it's out of my imagination. I'm just kind of fudging my way along with my pencil. But now draw that house, that house, that house, and the mountains out of your imagination from overhead and down below. I needed something to help me. So I did something for the first time in my career. I decided to build a diorama model. You can see it. We're going to look at it in a little bit, but it's behind me. And that way, I could build the mountain, I could build the gorge, I could build the river, and I could build the little town and the houses, and I could see it. And I could see the farm where the yellow bus ends up. And that way I could use it as a reference to draw by. And then sometimes I would take pictures as reference, and it really unlocked it. And Kate, real quick, the last thing is, as I'm doing this, you see this big model, and I'll show it to you in a second. But as I'm doing it, I realized I'm doing a book about a subject with the protagonist, which is kind of like one of the most iconic symbols in our society, a yellow school bus. So for that reason, I decided to do another first in my picture book career, and that was use charcoal, black and white art, so that every turn of the spread, whether it's little teeny 3-year-old fingers or teenagers or us adults, that yellow will be emphasized.
I'm really glad that you brought up the charcoal and the yellow, because I wanted to touch on your use of limited palette in the book, Loren. I'd love it if you could elaborate on that choice and how you decided to use color to amplify the message and the storytelling.
Yeah, and real briefly too, Kate, and these decisions weren't completely just made by me. They were made by us, weren't they? I was pitching these ideas to you and Jen and the art director, Beth Clark, Jen Besser from Macmillan. And we made some of these decisions by committee. You know, I wanted their support. I didn't want to just go crazy with my art. I wanted them to really feel it and know what I'm doing. But yeah, your point is, so I decided that I would blend these charcoal drawings, which I love. It took me right back to when I was in 7th grade, Mr. Pennington's art class, the first time I ever had any formal art training. He would give us these big sheets of paper and charcoal blocks. And that's what I was doing on this book, a little more detailed than back then. But I decided I would blend the acrylic yellow, fully painted. The bus would be in color, but also everything inside the bus would become in full color as well. And to me, that was sort of like my own little metaphor or symbol of the life that the yellow bus gets inside her when she's serving others, when she's doing something for others.
I just love that, Loren. I'm actually going to jump ahead. I know we had one other question we wanted to chat about, but I want to make sure we have a little bit of time for everyone to see the model. So I know this is a pretty vast question, but I'd love if you could tell us a bit about what you hope readers take away from the story.
Well, I think so. One of the exciting parts for me, and it was just me just fumbling around trying to formulate the manuscript, was the refrain of, and they filled her with joy, and they filled her with joy. And when you read the yellow bus, the yellow bus goes on kind of an unexpected journey. And every time, despite circumstance, she's filled with joy. So really, Kate, what I hope, the best that I could hope from my readers is that they would read that and they would notice that refrain, they filled her with joy. And they would ask themselves, like I asked myself when I saw the goat paddock in the broken down bus, that they would ask themselves, why? Why is she filled with joy? And I believe the answer will be because she's doing something for someone else. Even despite her dire circumstances, by the way, which she can't control. It's up and down and up and down throughout the whole book, out of her control. But what she can control is how she reacts to it. So those are, kind of like in my own little head here, those are the so-called deeper themes that I was trying to address in the yellow bus.
Talking with you fills me with joy, Loren. Talking about this book fills me with joy. But I know if we can just steal a little more of everyone's time, Loren was hoping to show you all a bit of the model. So Loren, I think we've all waited long enough. Can you take us on a quick little tour?
Okay, I will. I appreciate everybody hanging with me here. This model was supposed to last me about a week and be about the size of a card table, but it grew and grew and grew, and it became literally 10 feet by 4 feet. And if you can look, I'll just try and scan it. But what it allowed me to do is stand here. But what I want to do is show everybody. See, I had this little yellow bus, and I built this thing to scale out of cardboard and styrofoam and floral foam. But watch what happens when I put the light on these buildings. These are little railroad model houses that I kind of had to cut up and make to scale. Starts up here. There's the school. There's the neighborhood. This is a farm that ends up in the middle of the book becoming a subdivision. There's the bridge. There's the farm below. And this is where the yellow bus ends up. And in the story, that is where something is being built. But what I want to show everyone is the importance of lighting in artwork. So watch me throw the light on. this light and see how it changes. So now I can stand here and I can draw the shadows and I can see the 3-dimension and I can do a sketch just like this from this viewpoint. And that sketch is in the book. And then I can see how the shadow reacts to the barn and the entire landscape. So with that, I could spend all day showing that with you guys and talking
We
about
could
it.
spend all day with you looking at it, Loren. And thank you everyone for staying with us. I just want to mention that Loren was kind enough to let us include an author's note at the end where we talk a bit about the process in the book. So we're hoping that you can all share that with your students and kids, because I think that they would love to see the photos of the model that are in the back of the book as well. Well, Loren, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for your extra time.
Thank you, Kate. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Macmillan. Thanks, Alex Quill. Thanks, everyone. Mary Van Aken.
Thank you so much, Loren and Kate. Truly, I could listen to you both speak all day. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I will turn it over to Booklist for some final notes.
Thank you so much, Alex, and to the entire Macmillan Children's School and Library team. That was the coolest diorama I've ever seen, and this is safely our first webinar with a song and a diorama, so that's exciting. Next slide, please. Tomorrow, all attendees will receive an email containing links to today's video recording, presentation slides, title list, and a certificate of completion. For more about Booklist webinars, be sure to visit www.booklistonline.com/webinars, where you can view archives of past webinars and register for upcoming ones like those you see here. Next slide, please. Staff training, in-services, local conference, Booklist can help. You can now request free copies of Booklist and Booklist Reader for upcoming staff training programs so you can help the next generation of library workers become readers advisory and collection development superstars. Scan the QR code on the screen, visit our website, or email info@booklistonline.com for more details. Next slide, please. Mastering the art of reader's advisory involves ongoing study, both of major concepts that form the backbone of good RA practice and of the skills that make your RA practice effective in the day-to-day. This series of Booklist workshops on Thursday, March 14th, is designed to keep you up to speed on both the ideas and practice that will enhance your RA game. Visit the Booklist website to register now so you can learn from experts in the field about how genres relate to each other, how to talk to patrons about their leisure reading, and how to write an effective book annotation. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. One more huge thank you to our special guests who joined us both in video and on person, and to our sponsor, the MacKids School and Library team. This concludes today's webinar. See you next time.